I used to work the night shift at a small 24-hour pharmacy on the edge of town in a quiet residential area. During the night shift, you could expect anywhere from 10 to 15 people to come in for emergency medications or last-minute supplies. This one particular night, there was this one guy in his early 30s that came in. He started making weird noises, like loud yelling noises. I assumed he had some kind of mental disability. In fact, my sister has a mental disability, so I immediately felt sympathy for the guy. He walked up to the counter without any items, with his head facing me, but his eyes were looking up at the ceiling. I felt uncomfortable. I honestly didn't know how to deal with it. I tried speaking with him, but he only responded in loud noises. I kept checking if he was with someone outside, but he was alone. There weren't any cars in the parking lot, so I assumed he walked. He stood there for so long, looking up at the ceiling and making noises, that I tried to get him out by handing him a small bottle of aspirin and telling him he could go. I tried finding some kind of number to call for someone to help him, but then out of nowhere, he finally turned around and walked out of the store. I felt so horrible for the man, but at the same time, I felt a bit creeped out about it too. An hour later, the phone at the pharmacy counter rang. I picked it up to hear the familiar yelling sounds of the man from earlier. It caught me off guard, and I didn't know what to think other than this has to be some kind of prank. But then, just as I thought it was over, I heard a whisper. My name, coming from the other end of the line. I hung up on him and was now becoming paranoid of my surroundings. I constantly checked the outside through the windows. When 6 a.m. came, the pharmacist working the morning shift came in, finally allowing for me to go home. It wasn't my problem anymore. I got home and threw all my stuff on the table, ready to watch TV and have a quick nap on the sofa. But my phone rang within a minute after entering the door. I felt a chill run down my spine as I wondered who would be calling at 6:15 in the morning. I could only imagine it was bad news. I braced myself and picked up the phone to hear the man again. I felt sick to my stomach as I listened to the loud noises he made. I struggled to slam the phone down to the receiver, just as I started to hear my name being whispered down the line. I wasn't working the following night shift, which was a relief since I had already been through enough. All night, I felt like I was being watched, even with all the blinds shut, and I could swear I heard strange noises coming from all over my house. I refused to get any sleep until the sun came up. Weeks passed, and I had forgotten about the incident, until one day, when going into the basement for the first time in a while, I found various bills of mine scattered on the basement floor. When I went into the basement closet, I found writing on the walls. The pharmacy name had been written in Sharpie on the wall, along with the address of the pharmacy I worked at. The most disturbing part, I also found various prescription bottles, along with several syringes, sitting in the closet. What started as an encounter with someone who seemed mentally ill turned into something much more terrifying. He had been hiding in my basement for who knows how long, before leaving without a trace. I haven't seen or heard from him since, but I still check my basement every day. Looking back, I realized how easy it would have been for him to get my phone number from one of the bills scattered on the basement floor, among them, telephone bills. At least he could have done me the courtesy of paying the bills, instead of letting me get late reminder notices in the mail. I work at a 24-hour gas station off of a rural highway, about 15 miles from the nearest town. I was pretty over the moon after having a lovely lunch date with my new girlfriend earlier that day, so I was in a good mood when I started my shift. I'm a shift supervisor, but for the most part, I just do the same things everyone else does, which is run the register and stock the shelves. For overnight hours, we always have at least 2 people, one being a supervisor and the other usually being a cashier. On this night, the cashier had called in sick, and when I called the others to see if they could cover a shift, none of them said they could. So, by 1 a.m., I was the only worker there. Now, usually the gas station doesn't get busy overnight, and the morning shift arrives at 6 a.m., so it wasn't an entire shift alone. But it still meant that for 5 hours, I had to do everything myself. I kept the security cameras on the monitor behind the counter in case someone pulled up to the pumps, then started working on the tasks I had for the night. I started by cleaning the coffee station, but a few minutes in, I was interrupted by a banging sound from the front of the store. I walked down and looked over the counter, seeing a man standing at the front door and banging on it, with a piece of paper rolled up like a scroll in one hand. Then he pressed his face against the glass and looked inside, scanning the whole room before his eyes set on me. I walked over to the door as he stared at me, and when I got closer, he backed up and waited like he thought I was going to open it. I told him through the glass that we were open and he could just come in. He looked confused, so I told him again that the door wasn't locked and he could just pull it open. He showed no response that time, not giving me any idea whether he understood me or not, so I just turned around and walked back to the counter. I figured he'd have to get the hint at some point that he needed to pull rather than push the door. I continued working on the coffee station, spending at least 15 to 20 minutes on it. Throughout this time, I had gone once to check the front to see if the man had left, and from what I could see, he was gone. The whole forecourt was empty, and the man was not at the door. I continued on with my work, but I always kept an eye on the monitor while I worked. This time, some 20 minutes later, while I checked the monitor, I saw that there was just a person moving around the pump area, but there wasn't a car to be seen. Looking more closely, I realized it was the same man who had been at the door earlier. I kept watching the monitor for a minute, but then he walked out of the camera's view. I looked at the different camera angles trying to spot him again, but couldn't see him anywhere. After a few minutes with no sign of him, I went back to restocking the cooler. But as I was putting drinks on the shelf, I slowed to a stop when I heard a loud noise from outside. I stood in place and listened, hearing what sounded like something heavy being dragged across the forecourt. I walked to the front windows and looked out, but couldn't see anything in the darkness beyond the light from the store. I went back to restocking, but kept glancing at the security monitor, feeling uneasy. After a few minutes, I saw movement on one of the cameras. A man was walking around the side of the building carrying something. I watched as he disappeared from view of the cameras, then heard another sound, this time closer to the store. When I went to check the front door, my heart stopped. The man had taken some of our outdoor propane tanks off the side display and placed them in front of the entrance, blocking it completely. I saw him through the window, standing outside now with a fuel pump nozzle in his hand and a lighter in the other. He was shouting that he would burn the whole place down if I tried to call anyone. I backed away from the door, moving behind the counter. I dropped down and hit the emergency fuel shutoff button, behind the counter first, cutting off the supply to all the pumps. I knew there was still some fuel in the hose he was holding, but at least he wouldn't be able to pump much more. Obviously, the propane tanks he'd placed at the door would still explode if he set them on fire. I crawled quickly toward the back emergency exit. Once I reached the door, I pushed it open and ran to my car parked on the side of the building. I called the police from my car, while keeping my eyes on the man outside. He was still standing by the front entrance with the fuel nozzle, looking into the store. After a few minutes, he must have realized I had escaped, because he threw down the nozzle and ran away, also dropping the piece of paper I had seen him holding earlier. The police arrived shortly after, but they couldn't find him anywhere. They found the paper he dropped right by the front door. It was a photo of me with my new girlfriend, taken with a telephoto lens, while we were having lunch outside a cafe the day before. On the back of the photo, he had written, "You stole my girlfriend. I'll make you pay one day." The police showed it to me during initial questioning at the gas station. Turns out my girlfriend was his ex, which partly explained why he targeted me. And here I was thinking the whole time it was completely unprovoked, as I had never seen that man before in my life. I tried not to think about it too much, but knowing he was after me because of my girlfriend made it all the more worse. Even with his identity now known, they still haven't caught him. I still worry about him coming back to finish what he started. I worked at a grocery store in my small town when I was in college. I started during semester break on day shifts as a stocker and reorganizer, which worked fine when I had no classes. When the new semester began, management asked if I would switch to overnight shifts, and I actually wanted to since it fit perfectly with my class schedule. The night position came with an increase of $3 per hour, which was just an extra bonus for me. That was a big deal for a college student, so it was an easy decision to make. A few months in, everything was going well, even though I was technically doing the same job as I was when I worked mid-shifts. It was a completely different job, though, because I didn't have to interact with customers, waste time helping them, or anything. I just did my work, listened to music, and nobody bothered me. The night shift was actually better than days, right up until that one shift ruined it all. Over the following months, I strangely started to become less and less comfortable while working. It was weird because I figured I should be getting more comfortable as time went on, but I began thinking about how isolated the building was, and it kind of creeped me out. Sometimes I'd look up from the shelf and see the empty, dark store with what felt like dozens of aisles where anything could be hiding. I'd pull my headphones out and listen, hearing nothing but silence, which for some reason made me feel even more creeped out. But then, one night, when I was doing my usual listening to music and stalking, I heard something from the other side of the store. I stopped moving for a moment as I registered in my head that I did actually hear something. Then I pulled out my headphones and looked up. I kind of just stood there for a few minutes, scared to move. I was waiting for something else to happen, but nothing ever did, so I went back to my work. This time, I left my headphones out, though. I finished rearranging the shelf, then I rolled my cart to the storage room to grab all the restocking items. But that's when I heard it again. This time, with my headphones away, I could confirm it was coming from inside the building, and I could tell it was the sound of something falling on the ground. It might have sounded just like a small can hitting the floor, but in such a large, quiet store, it echoed loudly. Again, I froze and just stared in the direction I heard the sound coming from. Considering the building was full of products, it didn't seem unlikely for a couple of items to fall down randomly, but that didn't really make me feel any more comfortable. Something felt off, like I was being watched. My head started doing that thing again, going through every reason to be scared of the place, and I was trying really hard not to panic. I knew the likelihood of it just being a product falling off the shelf was high, and I also knew that I'd often get into my head and scare myself for no reason. So I got myself to walk over and check. I walked slowly through the aisles of products, looking down each one. I got to the very last aisle, and there was nothing, not a product or anything, on the floor, down any of the aisles. The panic started to come up in my head again. I turned around, and my heart stopped. There were two people standing by the door leading to the loading dock. A man was holding a baseball bat, tapping it against his palm, while a woman in a dark hoodie stood beside him. The woman suddenly called out my name from across the store. I didn't recognize her voice and couldn't make out their faces in the dim light. The man pointed the bat at me and told me to open the safe in the manager's office if I didn't want to get hurt. I resisted every urge in my body to scream and run. I looked away, pretending to comply, and told them I would go to the manager's office to open the safe. I walked slowly toward the office, which was toward the front right side of the store, not far from the entrance. I made sure to stay far enough from the entrance so they wouldn't notice my intentions. I could feel them following, about 20 feet behind me, still believing I was going to open the safe. But as I got closer to the front, I broke into a sprint, ran to the entrance, unlocked the front door, and as soon as I closed and locked it behind me, I hightailed it out of there, running around the building to my car and locking myself inside. I called the police, shaking and crying. They arrived shortly after, and while some waited out front, 2 officers went inside to search the building. They came back out alone, saying they didn't find anyone. My manager had us do an inventory check and everything in the following days, but nothing seemed to be out of the ordinary. No products were missing, and no money was left in the cash registers to take. It made everyone question why those people were in the building, or if there even was anyone at all. It really sucked, because a lot of my coworkers thought I was just making it up. But the security footage confirmed everything. I know what I heard, and I know what I saw. There was no mistaking it. I kept working at the store after that night, and I continued working night shifts, as my college classes during the day still made it the most practical option for me. After that, nothing weird ever happened again. I realized later that they must have known my name from the Employee of the Month photo hanging near the loading dock entrance.